Welcome back from that short break. I hope everyone made a cup of tea and got a snack for the next half an hour. And if you have just joined us, you're very welcome to In Conversation with. This is episode 17. And earlier we were joined by Ross McGarry, who studied chemical and pharmaceutical sciences in DCU. And in a couple of moments' time, we will be joined by Sam McKeague, who is a graduate of physics with astronomy in DCU. So again, for anyone who has joined, we do have a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So if you do want to ask our panelists anything in particular, you can do that throughout the conversation. I'll ask them as many questions as I think will be relevant. But if there is something additional that you want to ask, you are absolutely free to do that through the Q&A. So without further ado, I am going to bring Sam in as a panelist. So Sam, you should get a notification now to join me on the big screen. Hopefully that's worked. Okay, it's working. Sam, you're with me.
Yes, I am.
How are things?
Not too bad. Not too bad. It's not too bad a day.
Good. I know it's not too bad for a Wednesday. We're getting there, middle of the week, closer to Friday now than we are to Monday. How are you? Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I saw you were in there for the earlier conversation as well, so you're very good for tuning in. We've quite a good crowd today, which is fantastic, and hopefully they'll have a couple of questions, and if not, you'll be let off the hook a little bit earlier than expected. But Sam, you studied physics with astronomy in DCU. So can we go back? We'll go back and maybe work kind of chronologically from there. When you were in sixth year or just before you came to university, was this always on the cards? Did you only discover it maybe while you were in college? How did you end up in that course in DCU?
It was very much for me, always on the cards. In junior cert, I found I was very good at and really enjoyed mathematics. So once I had finished my junior cert, went into TUI and was starting to think along the lines of what would I do going down the line. I definitely wanted to do something mathematical, and physics is definitely a good way to go about that. A lot of mathematics courses can be a little bit more specific, for lack of a better way of saying it. Physics keeps it a bit broader. And as I went on in my leaving cert, I did physics for my leaving cert. I really, really enjoyed it. And ultimately what it came down to was I was going to do either physics or engineering. And in the end, I put physics as my first preference over engineering. Actually, in the case of, and DCU was very much where I wanted. DCU, of the universities I ended up visiting or getting to meet representatives of, DCU appealed to me the most. And the first 4 things on my CEO were alternating physics and engineering courses in DCU.
Okay. So you left it up to the gods then in that case to,
that and my own leaving cert capabilities.
Yeah, of course. In terms of, like you kind of didn't have that set plan. It was, okay, either physics, engineering, this is where I'm hoping to go. So landed anyway on physics with astronomy. And that's how you did it. So for anyone who's maybe considering physics for kind of third level education, you can do a general entry into physics in DCU where your first year is kind of getting everyone on the same playing field, and then from second year onwards you can kind of choose an area that you prefer to go into. So yours or from the get-go was physics with astronomy. So for someone who's maybe listening in today and is interested in physics, what's the kind of structure of the course in terms of, first year all the way up to when you graduate?
So it's a little bit different than when I did it, and Ross was touching on this about chemistry as well. Just in the sense that when I did it, I went straight into physics with astronomy. Now in first year, you enter a general physics course. And in the general physics course, the first year is the same for everybody. And from second year on, you can decide if you're going, which of the 3 physics pathways we have available that you can choose. And that's physics with astronomy, applied physics, and physics with biomedical science. So the general course of the general structure of the course as a whole is that it is primarily a general physics course. You'll be learning about electromagnetism and electrodynamics. You do some mathematical modeling, light and optics, a little bit of material physics and nuclear physics. But depending on what your pathway, and in the case of astronomy, you'll have at certain points in the course a little bit more emphasis or focus on astronomy and astrophysics type subjects. And what experiments you do in labs and what options you'll have for major projects is typically focused more on what your pathway is. So if you're in astronomy, you'll have more astronomy focused or relevant labs compared to someone doing physics or biomedical.
Sure. So, for someone who maybe knows they want to do physics, but they're not sure what strand they would eventually like to go into, and maybe, like, of course, you can only speak from kind of your own experience. But what did you love, say, about astronomy or astrophysics or space science in particular that really drew you to that route compared to some others?
Yes, absolutely. So for me personally, part of it started when I was younger, that I've always loved sci-fi, and that did start a bit of an interest in learning more about space and about a bit of astronomy and astrophysics. For me, part of it for me as well, and a bit more personal, is just a fascination with the extreme, for lack of a better word. And there's nothing bigger, more expansive than learning about the universe itself and about how stars form and how all the models for potentially how our own universe and planet came into existence. So that side of it is something that's always really fascinated me and made me want to learn more about it. I will say, for anyone who's a bit more torn than maybe I was, the advantage you get a bit with this course as well is with the first year of it, you're all doing the exact same classes no matter what. And there is an introduction, essentially an intro to astronomy module in the first year. So if you go into general physics and DCU, if that module bores you to tears, well, there you go. You're not going to get much enjoyment out of the ones coming down the line. If you find, some of the practical physics labs and sort of like nuclear or material physics more appealing in the first year, well, applied physics might be a bit more along lines for you. Unfortunately, the one caveat is for physics with biomed, there's no biomed specific subjects until you start the pathway in second year. But you'll still, but even then, the physics, because this is a problem, I've known students who've had this. Physics with biomedical science is a physics course with some biomedical science in it. If you go in thinking, well, I like biology, I'm not sure about physics, this will do, you're going to get a bit smacked in the head because it's very physics heavy. And I know people who've made that mistake.
Yeah, that's great to know. And this is why we want to speak to students who have been through these courses, because they can really identify these potential pitfalls or roadblocks that students can come across. So that's a fantastic piece of advice. And for anyone who's just entered the call, there is a Q&A function if you want to ask Sam something in particular about physics with astronomy. So I'd imagine then from kind of, first, second year onwards, you're building, as Ross kind of mentioned earlier, on your knowledge that you've gained the year before. So is there an opportunity to do a work placement then in this course?
Yes, so like was discussed with Ross earlier, there is intra in third year. With physics with astronomy, there's a little bit more to it though. In physics in general, you have intra, and you'll have the opportunity to go and do a job or internship with companies that are looking for. It's often going to be companies in industry, and companies like Intel, or companies with major R&D. There's a company name I know a few people who've gone to, but the company's name slipped my mind, which is a company in Ireland, does like touchscreen technology and things like that.
Oh, cool.
But if you're in physics with astronomy, you can still do that, or you can take the option to do a project which is tied to getting an opportunity to go visit an astrophysics research facility somewhere in Europe. Now, sort of, disclaimer, asterisks, in the current climate, this is a little bit, this is not quite doable. Instead, we have programs to try and give people research project opportunities with some other astrophysics research groups in Dublin, namely the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies. So you unfortunately won't get the aspect going abroad at the current climate, but once, if you're a couple of years down the line, hopefully that won't be an issue. So for me, for example, I went on a research trip to the European Space Agency Center, which is a major research center for the European Space Agency in just outside of Madrid in Spain. Spent a week there getting lectures from major scientists who worked for decades with the European Space Agency, did a little bit of learning about some of the slightly more rudimentary analyses of different data that they get from real ESA satellites. And we presented, once we got back, we did presentations about what we'd learned and what we covered during that trip. And I also, because I wanted to get a bit of this experience went out and sought my own internship working in industry, and I worked with an engineering company for about 6 months. So I got a bit of the best of both worlds. And I will, like, if you want to get a bit more experience of what working industry coming out with a degree, maybe like I do recommend the Intra.
Mhm.
If you're potentially interested in astrophysics or astronomy academia, and you want to know for sure if you're interested in it or not, do the research or trip, or the project, because I came out of that going, yeah, I want to continue on in astrophysics academia.
That's an amazing opportunity, and the fact that you're able to source both is an incredible opportunity. And DCU, as you mentioned, has a lot of different connections, whether it is in industry or research. And by the time you're in third year, which is when most of those internships happen, you probably do have some sort of idea as to what area you want to go through. And I'm sure your lecturers would be helpful in terms of like guiding you and, oh, well, you're particularly good at this, maybe take a look at this website or this group, who would be able to kind of further that interest for you. So I'm sure you had some amazing stories from your internships. Anything that stands out maybe as a really cool thing or a cool project you got to work on as part of your internship or the research project?
Let me think. I don't necessarily have the most exciting one as far as my internship would go for some people, because mine was very computationally focused. I did a lot of programming and a lot of testing out sort of new software methods that they were using for experiments, which I found really enjoyable. I don't know if other people would necessarily.
I'm sure the people tuned into this talk would find that interesting. But it's an amazing opportunity for a student to be able to be doing
very
that
much
stuff.
is, and at least the company I got to work for, it's an engineering company called ABB. What was very freeing about the experience was there was very little having someone constantly looking over your shoulder what you were working. I would be working away on the software and the programming a few days, and then every once in a while I'd need to go down to the R&D lab, run some tests on some of the hardware the software was tied to. And there was no set schedule of you're in the lab this time, you're at your desk this time. It was, I need some new data. Borrow a slide rule off someone's desk and then go down to the lab with the samples I needed. That kind of idea. Getting that kind of experience is really useful. I would actually say it was experiences like that which I found, even compared to my intro project, the astrophysics project, the internship, that kind of experience of more free working environment was something I probably found more useful in working on my final year project, because kind of similarly, when you're doing your final year project, you're given set hours in the week where you're not going to have any lectures. This is all lab time, whatever. But there's no, it is similar of, this is the time allocated in your weekly schedule, but no one's going to sit there and go, are you in the lab right now? You're trusted to do the work, and you have to, and getting a bit of a taster for that before doing it helped a lot, I think.
Yeah, a lot of students, I think, would be in agreement in that you learn skills more so on your internship, like, or whether it's across physics, engineering, business, humanities. It's often about the things you can bring into final year and the experiences that you have. So now you know how to kind of work unsupervised, whereas before it was very much, I have to go to the lecture because they're taking attendance and I have to be there, more so than kind of taking that like kind of autonomy over your work. So you did bring up then that final year research. So you went back to college then for final year, fourth year, after not only an internship but also research project for that week or two. So what was that like, your final year project and returning after being out in the world?
It was a little strange, because you do, several months of suddenly I'm not doing college life. It was more a bit more of a 9-to-5 work life. It was a bit strange. But having said that, I personally really, really enjoyed my final year project experience. For me, in hindsight, it's some of the best work I think I've ever done, and it was rewarding to finish it as well. I personally took a project which was very astrophysics focused. The way you select your final year project, unlike Ross, I didn't do one that was continuing on from the work I did on the internship. I started completely from scratch again, because what happens is you'll be given a list, or all final years are given a list of, here are all the final year projects available, here's the supervisors, and you do a preference list on what you would prefer to get. And then there's a bit it's the way the system as of now is if there's conflicting preference for like first preference or something, then whoever's higher on the pass list gets the project, because otherwise you could be going back and forth on who gets what for a long time. And in fact, like I did very well in a lot of my degree. I ended up having putting a same first preference to someone, and I didn't get my first preference. I ended up with my second preference. But it turned out, for me, it turned out very, very well. I still really, really enjoyed my own project. I learned a lot over the course of it. And for me, it's been extremely valuable continuing on into postgrad as well, because not partially for my own research, although my own research is, again, every time I've started from scratch in a research thing, it's always going a bit square one. I don't quite continue from the last one.
Yeah.
But I, as a postgrad, I've done a lot of tutoring in astrophysics labs here in DCU. Well, here in DCU. And what I did for my final year project was extremely helpful in having a better understanding of some of the stuff that I am teaching in those labs.
Yeah, fantastic. So you would have finished then in fourth year and had your kind of project complete. What was the trajectory from there? Did you go into research? Did you work for a while? What did you do after that?
So my plan after that was essentially I was offered by one of the physics lecturers, who's the head of astrophysics. I was offered if I wanted to do applications for postgrad research funding during my final year, which I took. And I basically went through the attitude, okay, if I get one of these grants or scholarships, I'm going to do whichever research that's tied to and pursue postgraduate qualification. All of them, in my case, were all applying for PhDs. If I don't, I'm going to go and try and find some work. And if I want to continue on again down the line, grand, but I'm going to get some money first. And as luck would have it, I did successfully get the fund. Well, the applications we did, unfortunately, didn't go through. It's extremely competitive trying to get scholarships for postgrads all the time. But I got lucky that my supervisor had received funding for a separate project that she did not have a student for yet. So I took that opportunity, and that's what I'm hoping now in 5-ish months to be starting to be submitting a thesis on.
Fantastic. Yeah, no. And hopefully that all works out for you. So you kind of ended up, kind of returning to DCU to continue studies, but also been able to teach as well, which is a nice full circle. If you came in as often first years, you don't really know what's going on. You don't know who these teaching assistants are, or these like tutors, and now you're one of those people, which is nice and different through the online learning, I'm sure, but
very much,
the quality is still there all the same. For someone who maybe is the 5th or 6th year and is thinking, cool, I like physics, what sort of jobs could I get with physics, with astronomy? That is the question I have. What sort of careers could you go into from this course?
Excellent question, because that's a question I've spoken a lot at open days in the BT Young Scientists for DCU and physics a lot, and this is by far one of the most common questions I get. And I feel there's been some misinformation's gotten around in the last couple of years, because I so frequently get asked, I've heard you get this, all you can do is teach or go into research, and that's not true. Now, it's granted, a lot of people will go into research or teaching. It's very easy to do that, but you are by no means limited with any kind of physics degree in what kind of job ways you want to go. I know quite a few people who've gone into finance. With a physics degree, you are demonstrating a certain degree of skill in problem solving and mathematics, which is extremely valuable in all kinds of industries, whether it be research, whether it be finance, whether it be fields such as meteorology, or even computational science and computing and programming, and even though you'd go and get a degree in engineering, you can go into engineering fields with a physics degree. Absolutely. There's actually several modules in DCU that physics students share with engineering students. In fact, at least one. is technically an engineering module that the physics students are sitting in on rather than the other way around.
Yeah, interesting. And I think you made a great point there about the skills more so. So if you are a problem solver, you're interested in maths and you want to go down that route, don't be too concerned about a specific label of a career. Sure, people graduating now, they say will have between like 12 and 14 different jobs in their life. So, you know, you're not necessarily tied to one career that you might want now. And I'm sure, and maybe it even happened for you, I know it happened for myself, you think you're going to end up doing one thing when you leave college, and it totally takes, you know, you go through so many different career, you know, brainstorms and loads of different things.
You go through steps of it. I mean, for me,
Yeah.
I'm approaching what will hopefully be the end of my PhD at this point, and what am I going to do when I get it? Haven't a clue.
Who knows?
I'll cross that bridge when I get there.
Exactly. And I think hopefully students can take solace in that. That is the majority of the line of thinking for people, is that I'm not sure what's going to happen next. We'll just see where it goes. So don't worry kind of too much, as said, about that end goal, because it could change 100 times before we even enter college.
Exactly. I honestly, my biggest recommendation is, if you are interested in physics and you think you'd like to learn more about it, look into pursuing a physics course, because you have no idea. You could end up in any number of careers by the time you're done with it. But if you are interested in the subject itself, you'll get a lot out of doing a degree in physics, from what you'll learn and what you'll get to experience and what you'll get to try a bit more hands-on.
Absolutely. And if you have a passion for something, and it even helps if you're good at it in school, you know, that's where you'll perform well
Exactly.
in university, and you'll be able to narrow down.
Having said that, the one other thing I just want to point out as well is physics often has a bit of a reputation as a very hard subject as well. Now, there's hard modules, there's hard classes, there's always going to be. But if you are interested, but you find maths in secondary school or physics in secondary school a bit daunting and it's a little hard, I'd still encourage you to give it a chance. It could be a little bit of an uphill battle, but I had several classmates who, you know, had to really put down to the grind at times, struggled on occasion with certain classes, and came out shining golden at the other side. Especially one particular friend of mine, who for various reasons had trouble at certain stages of the course. And came out at the end with a 2-1 and an offer for a PhD program in Queen's University Belfast. So it's absolutely doable, even if you don't have to be the whiz getting was it a H1 now in every science subject to get through a physics course.
Yeah, for sure. And as you mentioned, with that kind of determination combined with the supports that are there in DCU and the tutors and the one-to-one advice that's there, you know, absolutely, if you put your mind to it, you know, if you're good enough to get into the course, you're good enough to complete it, you know, given the commitment.
And that's actually one last thing, because I know I'm going on about many things,
no,
but the one last point just on that is actually you raise a good point, which is the support of the staff. Most physics in DCU tends to be a relatively small class between all three courses. You rarely have more than 50 people, and because of that, often relationships with the lecturers and the staff is very informal in physics. If you're struggling with a class or you've got a question, go up and talk to them afterwards once you're in the classroom again. But otherwise, send them an email, talk to them. Most of them, as I know, will be more than happy to help with any student that's struggling.
Absolutely. And that's great to know that even firsthand you have that, because we tell people all the time, you know, it's very easy to kind of have access to your lecturers if you are struggling or have a question. And it's great to hear that, you know, students who have actually gone through it can vouch for that as well, that there is that direct communication. There's no questions coming through. I think you're knocking it out of the park, Sam, in terms of kind of answering the questions before people can even think of them. But just to cover, because again, I'm such a fan of kind of outside of lecture times as well, because it's a huge part of university. Did you get involved much in kind of college life?
I did, absolutely. The main, more a bit in my later years, because I was a commuter in my first year. I was still very much getting used to commuting outside for very long hours. But yes, in particular, there was one or two clubs or socks I dipped in and out of, but the one I was there from day one was I was in DCU Game Society, because I'm a big fan of video games, always have, always will be. So I started attending GameSock mainly for that, but they also do board games and PC games, and board games especially actually taught me, I learned so much about loads of really technical board games that exist today, and absolutely loved it. I was still attending GameSock on and off right up until COVID lockdown
Yeah.
shut down the universities. I absolutely love the DCU Game Society.
Fantastic. That's great to hear that. Again, you could have an interest in something. You don't necessarily have to study it in college, but you can still, reap the benefits of enjoying it within college life as well. And as I was saying earlier, we often ask people what their favorite part of college life was, and often it is actually an event that happened, outside of lecture hours. So maybe if we finish up with that question for you, Sam, if you had one memory that will stick with you from your years in university, even your ongoing time in the university, could you pick just one?
Well, I'm going to pick the one that's the first to come to mind, which is outside of lecture hours. Though, when I was in second year, I was actually on the GameSock committee, and there was an event being hosted. I think it was by the Music Society called DC Eurovision. It was going to be an inter-society clubs and society style Eurovision contest with representatives from all the different clubs and socks. And I volunteered to represent GameSock because I've got some singing experience, and I can't, they got a guest on who was a former Eurovision contestant for Ireland, and unfortunately I cannot remember his name. It's just slipped my mind. But I went on, did my number, and got a really good reception. There was a couple of the committee who were on with me at the time came to watch, and he said to me afterwards, "Tom, I didn't expect you to be that good." But as well as that, when we went up and there was like these faux interviews being done, I was sitting for that, and the guy who was the guest host came up, hugged me, and said, "That's my favorite act of the night."
And that is the best moment. No, I'm obsessed with that. Yeah, but exactly.
Amazing.
And I really love hearing these stories because, as humans, we just kind of make these decisions. We're like, oh, physics, extremely smart, maybe doesn't do anything else. But it's like, hang on a sec, I competed in DC Eurovision and, got a compliment. So absolutely, like I love those little stories. So we are just at the end of our talk now. There's no more questions coming in. As I said, these sessions have been recorded so people can watch them back. And if you do have any questions, sure, just message us through the YouTube video or through our email, anything like that. But Sam, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking that half an hour out to give this guidance, and I'm sure you've absolutely helped guide some students towards physics with astronomy through your own experience. So thank you very, very much for that. We'll be back next week with another episode. We won't be here the week after because it'll be St. Patrick's Day, but if there is any courses you want us to cover, just send us a message and we'll make sure to get a representative from it. But this has been Sam at 4:30 with Physics with Astronomy. Thanks a million, Sam, and I'll see everybody next week. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Bye.